Good afternoon and welcome to the Brown Bag on the Brazos. I'm Judy Pierce, the Public Information Officer for the Brazos River Authority. I'm filling in today for David Collinsworth, who couldn't be with us, but we appreciate you taking the time to join us and learn a little bit more about what's going on at the Brazos River Authority. So we have a couple things on the agenda today. We're going to talk a little bit about golden algae and then the drought situation and our current water supply update. And then we'll take questions and answers. If you have anything, we would love to hear from you. We're going to do a little bit of a different format today than we've done in the past. In the past, we've pretty much just had presentations by each person that was going to speak. And this time we're going to have a little bit more of a conversation rather than a full presentation. And at the end, we will take questions for our presenters. And then we have a couple questions as well that have come in a little bit ahead of time. So if you would like to ask a question, you can do so by looking at the little bubble in the right-hand corner of your presentation screen and clicking on the area that says ask a question. We'll take as many questions as possible before 1 o'clock, but if we don't get to your question, please feel free to send us an email at information@brazos.org, and we will be happy to answer your questions either via email or include them in the next Brown Bag on the Brazos presentation that we have coming up. We recently had a board of directors meeting. It was held on March 27th here at the BRA's offices in Waco. Our next meeting will be on May the 22nd. It will be live streamed, and you can also attend in person if you're interested. It will begin, we believe, at 9 o'clock on May 22nd. So if you have questions in the meantime, please feel free to contact us at information@brazos.org about any upcoming board meetings. So the first topic that we're going to be talking about today is golden algae. With our first guest is Jenna Olson, our Environmental Programs Manager. And Jenna is in charge of our tracking golden algae as well as other number of things within her area. But Jenna, we're going to talk about a little bit about golden algae, mainly because in February and March, we started receiving calls from the general public at Lake Granbury, people that were fishing, people that lived there were finding quite a bit of dead fish on the lake, and they started to be concerned. So at that point, we had heard that golden algae levels were starting to increase, and it turns out that that was the case. It was a golden algae bloom. So could you tell us a little bit about golden algae and what was going on at Lake Granbury?
Sure. Okay, so golden algae, it's a microscopic algae. This is what they look like individually, just little algal cells. They occur worldwide, and they're usually found in brackish or coastal waters. But in Texas, it's found in our low saline inland water bodies.
That's Lake Granbury, obviously.
Correct. Yes. Okay, and then when conditions are favorable, this golden algae can definitely outcompete other algae in a system, and they can bloom or take over an algal community. And the first golden algae bloom in Texas was in 1985 in the Pecos River area. So we've been battling golden algae for nearly 40 years now. And the problem when golden algae blooms, it can produce toxins. It doesn't always, but it certainly can. And the toxin that golden algae produces affects all gill-breathing organisms. So all your fish, crayfish, freshwater mollusks, things like that.
And this only happens when it blooms, right?
Yes. And it's strange in that you can have a very concentrated bloom, and it may not always produce those toxins. You can also have a less concentrated bloom, and it will produce the toxins.
Okay.
So yes, but generally it's just when the golden algae blooms that you do have the toxins. And so the most detrimental effect, and the thing that we notice the most, is fish mortality.
So a lot of dead fish.
Yes.
Okay. So are there levels of toxicity that larger blooms, less large blooms?
Yes. There's a scale from 0 to 25, with 0 and 1 being very low toxicity. When you get to 5 units of toxicity, it's moderate considered, and then up to 25 is very lethal. And this last bloom we had, that it got to a 5. So not as bad as it has been in the past, like in 2003, 2005, but it was still definitely toxic.
Okay, so do the levels of toxicity then indicate about how many dead fish we're going to see, or is that a little different?
That won't tell you how many. I mean, you can assume if you got higher toxicity, you are going to get, more mortality. But with these golden algae blooms, there can be no toxicity and no fish kills, or, high toxicity, high density, and you can get hundreds of thousands of fish deaths. So it just really depends on the conditions out there and how long the bloom lasts. So if you've got a long duration bloom, obviously more fish mortality.
Okay, all right. So is there a certain time of year that this happens?
Yes. Here in our part of Texas, golden algae blooms generally happen in the winter months and through spring. And this is due to those favorable conditions I was talking about. Golden algae really thrives in lower temperature waters and a little salinity and a little bit basic pH. So when those water temperatures start getting below about 86 for a while, golden algae really like that and thrive. So yes, the winter months into spring, you usually have a bloom, but not to say it won't happen at other times of the year.
Okay.
Because it is an algae, they're very adaptable. We don't fully understand all the mechanics that cause it to bloom and then trigger toxicity. But yes, generally during the winter months.
Okay, so this is probably the last kill we'll see for a while, but it could also occur in the summer months.
It could,
Okay.
but yes, hopefully it is the last one for a while.
Okay, so golden algae is not the only reason we might see dead or dying fish, right? So there could be other environmental reasons that we would see dead fish floating in the water.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there could be other type of algal blooms that have different types of toxicity.
Okay.
Sucking oxygen from the water, low dissolved oxygen occurrences that
Okay.
will cause dead fish as well.
Okay, so if someone sees dead or dying fish, how would they know that it is golden algae?
Well, one way to tell, okay, that toxin, it attacks the gills and causes hemorrhaging in fish. So you can see on the slide up here, a lot of times, where the fin meets the body will be red and look like hemorrhaging, and they could be bleeding. Just other spots of red around the mouth, the eyes, and generally they're covered with mucus. So
Oh.
that and behavior wise, before they're dead, they do act disoriented. They may want to jump out of the water. You may see them going to where a freshwater tributary is coming in because they're trying to get away from the toxicity.
Right.
So,
Right.
but indications on a dead or dying fish, definitely hemorrhaging.
Okay, let's go back to that last slide that you had just before this one. So this was obviously a large fish kill.
Yeah, well, it's a couple of different ones, just illustrating how you might just have a few dead fish floating around, and that can be a golden algae event. A few fish up in that one canal, that looks like an even more toxic event. And then up above, that's, even more fish. So it just shows the varying degrees of mortality you may see with the golden algae event.
All right. So if someone sees dead or dying fish, I mean, should they avoid these areas? Is it toxic to humans?
Well, the toxicity in golden algae, it does just target those gill breathers. So those are the ones at risk. But the toxins do not affect humans or other animals. In fact, at the beginning of a golden algae kill, a lot of times you may see pelicans or other flocks of birds coming in to feast, and they have no ill effects. Other wildlife drinks that water with no ill effects. It only affects the gill breathing animals.
Okay, so if someone sees it around their dock, it's still okay to go ahead and boat or swim in that area?
Well, if there's an active golden algae bloom, and you hear that, it's no more risky to swim in or recreate in that water than it would be at any other time of year. But the biggest problem is if you do see dead or dying fish, certainly don't recreate around that, because decomposition has a whole host of other pathogens that could be a problem. But as far as golden algae goes and the toxicity of the water, it is not found to affect humans or pets.
Okay, great. So what are we doing about golden algae? Can we stop it from happening, or at least slow it down?
Unfortunately, like I said, in the early 2000s, there were some pretty significant golden algae events here in the Brazos Basin. And Parks and Wildlife was involved, as well as other entities and international conferences even trying to figure out if there is something feasible we can do to stop golden algae from blooming or curtail it once it does start blooming. But unfortunately, in a natural system that is not closed, there's nothing that you can do about it. Really just, when the conditions change, like the weather gets warmer, that's about it. But what you can do, if you do see a fish kill, Parks and Wildlife has a specific kills and spills team. So really any fish kill that you see, the right thing to do would be to report to them, and then they can investigate, pull water samples and do what needs to be done and alert who needs to be alerted. But also Brazos River Authority, we like that information. So we can, track the bloom, see how it's going. Is it getting worse and worse? Are people seeing more dead fish? Is it, getting less and less? So, and where in the lake it may be happening. And so definitely report to Parks and Wildlife and report to BRA what you see as well.
Okay, great. So you want to talk a little bit about our harmful algal bloom reporting system?
Yes. So this most recent algal bloom that we've dealt with, this is the first time we've used this tool. It's a harmful algal reporting tool. So if you have your phone, you can focus on that IR code and click the link, or you can type in this link towards the bottom of the screen. And here, rather than just a phone call to BRA, where it's kind of hard to describe, and sometimes it's hard to get pictures to us, if you want to go ahead and click on that, you can fill out this short little survey with what day and time you observed something, and you can mark on the map where you are, where you observed, dead fish or whatever you're seeing related to the harmful algal bloom. And then just a little comments, maybe describing your location, because sometimes everybody doesn't get their dot exactly where they want to on the map, and just kind of what you're observing, color, smell of water, if there's dead fish, that kind of thing. And you can very easily from your phone submit a picture. Or you can take a picture on your phone and you can submit it later if you save the picture on your phone. And then if you wish, you can fill out contact information. You don't have to, but we also ask at the bottom, are you willing to be contacted if you need to be? And you can say yes or no.
Okay.
So
you could still be anonymous if you don't want
absolutely.
to. Okay.
You could just put a dot on a map, which would be nice in a picture. And that would be, any information is good for us.
Okay, great. Right.
And if you want to see just some results from this last event, just very simply, this just shows we had 82 records were submitted to us from about February 13th. And it looks like about around March 12th, people weren't observing this many dead fish. And then we get one little blip towards the end of March, and I believe the person there is just saying that there's much fewer fish than they've been observing earlier. So this just kind of gives us a nice little time frame kind of to see what was going on out there. And BRA also, along with this, if you want to click on that, we have a tool where we can view all of the submissions at once. You want to zoom into the Granbury area so you can really see where all the observations were made.
So all of these green dots are places that had a report of dead or dying fish.
Correct.
During this last.
Yes. And if you want to go to the left-hand side of the screen and scroll down to the bottom, sorry, the entries there. It's really interesting because the progression of the golden algae blooms usually, it'll get the foraging fish first, will be the first to succumb.
What's a foraging fish now?
Oh, the smaller bait fish.
Okay.
And the ones that we've really noticed first are shad.
Okay.
And then, maybe freshwater drum, perch, minnow, sunfish, those things. And then as you get further into the event, the larger fish,
Okay.
you'll observe. So I thought it was interesting that some of the very first observations in February did note, shad are struggling. Most were dead by the next day. Then up a little bit further, some red freshwater drum. And then it goes, it follows the progression that we've seen in the past.
Okay.
So I thought that was really interesting.
So does it also move downstream as the water is moving downstream toward the dam?
It can. The golden algae blooms can be kind of patchy and they can move from day to day. So that's another really good thing. Like if we had 82 phone calls, sometimes you can't really see that big picture. It might have been 82 people reporting the same spots.
Right.
But with this, it really helps us to see where things are located.
Okay.
And help point Parks and Wildlife to where they need to be, where they need to investigate further. So it's been really helpful to us and hopefully to the public as well.
Well, great. So if you wanted to leave the public with just a few points about golden algae, what should they remember?
I would say the most important ones, there's a golden algae event, you probably will see dead fish. So expect that. Number one. Number two, it is not toxic to you or your pets. So that's another good thing to remember. And number three, definitely just report what you see. Okay. So we can alert the proper people and see what we can do about it.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you very much for coming and joining us today, letting us know a little bit more about golden algae. We're extremely happy that the people in Granbury were joining us here and helping to use the system for the first time. So hopefully we'll be able to track long-term over the years with golden algae blooms. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going to let Jenna walk away for just a second. And in the meantime, we'll bring on our next guest. But let me tell you just real quickly about an event that's coming up at Lake Granbury. We are going to be doing our 5th Water Safety Awareness Day at Lake Granbury on Saturday, May the 6th from 9 to 1. And we will have, at that event, we'll be giving away more than 300 kids' life jackets. We'll also be giving away 100 kids fishing poles, and we'll have people there that will be able to show them how to cast and bait hooks and that type of thing to learn how to fish that day. And we'll have a lot of local first responders on hand so that the kids can take a look at ambulances, the sheriff's cars, our swiftwater rescue people, fire boats. So it'll be a really fun day for the kids to come out and learn about water safety, what to do and not to do around the water, as well as the importance of wearing your life vest anytime that you are able to be close to the water, even if you're fishing or just playing alongside in one of the parks. We always try to encourage everyone to make sure that their kids have a life jacket on, and we're giving those away for free. So if you are in the Granbury area, please plan to come out on Saturday, May the 6th, anytime between 9 to 1 and give us a shout. We'll be there. K-Hits will be broadcasting live from the event, and we'll have a lot of really fun things for the kids to do while they're out there. Okay, so our next guest is Aaron Abel. And let me get our PowerPoint up here again. We're talking water supply and drought. So Aaron, thank you for coming back again. I know we have you each time we have one of these brown bags. So it looks like we're getting some rain over different parts of the basin, some light rain in the north and some pretty heavy rain today in the south. So tell us what's been going on.
Well, quite a bit has been going on recently, especially the last several days. We've kind of transitioned to spring. Although in parts of the basin today it's pretty cold, but transitioning from winter to spring obviously means the chance for more rainfall. Typically, we receive more of our rain, most of our rain from April through June. So. And we typically don't receive that much rain over the colder months, November through January, whether or not you're talking about La Nina or El Nino. We don't really, see much rain over the colder months. So obviously this event right now is good news. Absolutely. I mean, in the spring, we typically see heavy rainfall events when we have a cold front that moves down and it stalls out and it interacts with Gulf moisture. And that's what we're seeing, especially a little bit further downstream of the Central Basin, we're seeing a lot of rain. One of the things I think everybody can see this map that's on the screen, the observed rainfall over the last 30 days. And I want to caveat this to say that this doesn't include the last 24 hours of rainfall. So,
Right.
Around the Brenham to Navasota area and a little bit further downstream, they've seen 3 to 6 inches really over the last 12 to 18 hours. So that's a lot of rain. But in the last 30 days, what you'll see is we have been seeing some rain upstream of our reservoirs. And, I'll point out, obviously we can talk about our water supply storages a little bit later, but, Belton, Stillhouse Hollow, Georgetown, Proctor, those are the most impacted by the drought. And over the last 30 days, we've seen some rain. We've seen, some areas that have received 1.5 to 4 inches upstream of Belton, and even upstream of Proctor, around 1.5 to 3 inches as well. So that hasn't really translated to increased stream flow and inflows and increases in lake levels. So, that's something that we'll need more rain and heavier rain to generate some inflows. So
is it the ground is not yet saturated enough to generate inflows?
That is part of it. In that part of the basin, we still have some really dry soils, and there's also ponds, stock tanks, and the smaller streams need to fill up. Those empty storage sinks in the system have to fill up before you can generate stream flow. So we're seeing some rain, and if you look further to the north and to the east of the basin, in the Trinity, Natchez, and Sabine, you see a lot of rain over the last 30 days. We just kind of want that to inch over it a little bit further to the west, and we can. But we are seeing the system is doing well. I want to point that out to everybody. I mean, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but the system is performing as it was designed to capture water during flood times to use during dry times. And we have been dry over the last 18 months or so.
Right. So I understand not long ago, the NOAA Weather Service pretty much said that La Nina is complete, and we're looking at some different conditions, neutral conditions. But does that mean that we're looking at the opposite and an El Nino time with heavy rains or flooding that might become?
Yeah, so we track the El Nino La Nina cycle, which I think most folks have seen that in the news, that the sea surface temperatures off the coast of South America along the equator is tied somewhat to what we see in the U.S. and especially the southern part of the U.S. So La Nina is colder conditions, typically drier, over the southern tier. And then on the flip side, El Nino is warmer sea surface temperatures, and that affects the jet stream and the storms that impact the southern tier. So I think it was earlier in March, the Climate Prediction Center, which is a part of National Weather Service and NOAA, has said La Nina is done, and we are now in neutral conditions. So
we had La Nina for quite a while, though.
Yes, we had La Nina, for the better part, well, definitely three winters, and that's only happened a couple of times since they've really been recording, the sea surface temperatures, out in the Pacific. So we are now in neutral conditions. What does that mean? It's really hard to tell if we're going to get. I mean, obviously, here recently we've been getting some rainfall, but there's really not a good tie to neutral conditions and whether or not we're wet or dry. They are predicting, or at least current forecasts are indicating El Nino to form later in the summer. So, so the question is, well, okay, so if that does happen, which, we'll have to track that and see if it does happen, what does that mean for our weather in Texas and the Brazos, and how does it impact our system? Well, it's kind of hard. It's a complicated answer. So our weather is connected. It is definitely connected to El Nino. So if we are in an El Nino situation, it really impacts the colder months. So we typically will get more rainfall, but that's not always the case. I mean, there are some instances, over the last 50 years since they've been tracking it, where we were in an El Nino condition, but we didn't get as much rain. And so the storm systems that do occur during El Nino typically provide more rain. So we'll have to track that and see. So the storm system setup in the colder months during El Nino, may provide some beneficial rainfall, to Texas and the Brazos, if that happens.
So what's going to happen now between the time that they're predicting El Nino might come in as a neutral? Will we receive any more rainfall during, April, May, June?
Yeah, I think definitely what we're seeing and what is being predicted by the National Weather Service and NOAA is a tendency that at least the drought outlook will provide some benefits in some areas of the basin. And this is a map that I think we've shown in multiple brown bags, but it's basically a seasonal drought outlook valid for the next several months from April 1st through the end of June. So it was released at the end of March, and a lot of the basin is in drought, and but less so kind of downstream. And what this is showing is there's parts of the basin in the central and lower parts that drought may remain, but it's going to improve. And then there's some areas that will have complete removal, likely, like this rain that we're seeing here. Parts of the basin around the College Station area and a little bit further down, we'll see some removal of drought. So, what do we expect for the next the rest of the month of April? April is our first month in spring, and fortunately, the Climate Prediction Center is showing above normal precipitation. So the probability of above normal precipitation is higher. And, that's kind of what we're seeing right now this week and moving forward through the rest of April as well. As it relates to what are we going to see, until June over the next 3 months, kind of the longer term perspective, there's really no indication. This map shows the probability, and the browns show below normal probability for precipitation, and then the greens obviously above normal, and then the equal chances is the white areas, and it's kind of a flip of the coin. There's not really an indication whether we're going to see both above or below, but in this 3-month period, we can have weeks that may be above normal. So that's another thing to point out in these maps. But these are issued on a monthly basis, typically in the middle of the month. So this was March 16th. There'll be another one in the next couple of months or next couple of weeks that will come out. But again, this is the Climate Prediction Center product, and we look at that to see what the future may hold. This isn't a given that's going to happen. So.
Well, and that's a question I had too, is, Texas has been in a drought for a couple of years now, as was California, obviously in a very, very bad drought.
Right.
And over this past few months, they've received an incredible amount of both rainfall and snow. And it seems like, that weather is kind of moving eastward. So is Texas going to kind of follow California's movement and drought improvement?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we just saw, I think there's definitely going to be some improvement, from the rain that we're seeing this week, and chances later in the month. I think and also April through June is our wettest month. So we've transitioned away from La Nina. We may still have some dry times, but I think at least in the short term we're going to see some improvements. I don't know, what California was experiencing, the record snowfall that has created, an enormous amount of snowpack that's beneficial for their reservoirs. I don't know if we're going to see that type of precipitation here, but, what we're seeing this week is, it's a significant event. And if we can have multiple events like that, I think we'll definitely see more improvement as we move forward.
Great. Well, the Brazos Basin, is really large. It spans a very large area, all the way from north of Lubbock to the Gulf Coast. So very many different environmental areas for the state. How far would you say are we behind in rainfall for each of those areas? The upper part is obviously usually much more dry
Yeah.
than the area near the coast. So how far behind are we?
Yeah, that's a question, I guess, that many are wondering is, okay, we've been getting some rain, so, how has that impacted, I guess, from a long-term perspective, how far are we behind? And this is a map that represents the departure from normal precipitation just over the last 2 months. So what we're talking about here and what these colors represent is how much below normal rainfall or precipitation has fallen, over the last 60 days. So right now, as you can see, the basin outline is represented with the reservoir locations, and the central part of the basin, obviously, and then further downstream is seeing below normal precipitation, for the last 2 months, and more so, even further downstream, and that's going to be erased with this event. Pretty much, I think most of this will be erased from the area more or less downstream of Lake Limestone and including Somerville. And further upstream in the PK, Granbury, Whitney system on the main stem, we've kind of been doing pretty well as far as rainfall and being at least normal. And in some areas upstream of PK have been above normal. We have seen some inflows into PK over the last month or so, from rainfall that has increased PK's lake level, to some degree, and that's beneficial. And then obviously the Little River system, Proctor, Belton, Stillhouse, Georgetown, that area is where we need the most rain, and we have been below normal over the last 2 months, but hopefully we'll see more rain, and this will kind of dig out of that departure from normal precipitation. Looking a little bit further back to October, we like to look at it a little bit, longer term to see where we are. And, again, you'll see those departure from below normal rainfall in the upstream of the reservoirs in the Little River system. And so it's pretty similar to what we've seen in the last 2 months, but, hopefully we can receive some additional rain and this can change.
So how's the water supply looking? Our idea is to save as much water in these reservoirs as possible. So, during droughts, we have water to use. So how are we doing now?
Yeah. Well, over the last several months, we haven't changed that much as far as the water stored in the 11 reservoirs. So this is a graphic that.
So why is that? Why hasn't it changed much?
Yeah, but basically because we haven't had the rainfall to generate that stream flow and inflows into the reservoir. And the other thing that hasn't gone down because evaporation is pretty low during the colder months. And so, temperatures are lower, obviously, as well. So that helps. And water use is down.
So people aren't watering their lawns right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this graphic, this is as of yesterday, April 5th, and there's going to be some changes to this, hopefully, with the rain.
Next week will look different.
Next week will look a little bit different. Primarily, I think we'll see some benefits from Somerville for sure, and they're getting some pretty heavy rainfall around that reservoir and a little bit further downstream, and so we'll have to see what happens. But overall, we're still in stage 1 of our drought contingency plans, a drought watch. You can see that Lake Proctor, it's our most impacted reservoir. Obviously, Lake Proctor is a core reservoir located in the upper parts of the Leon River. It's at 40% full, and it's in stage 3 drought emergency. And stage 3, we want 20% reduction in water use. So we really need to have wise water use in that area as we move forward. And as a system, stage 1, we're recommending 5% reduction in water use. So in the table to the upper right, we've also included a drawdown and a 2-week change in the drawdown to kind of see and track and give folks information about where we're trending as we move forward. So, hopefully we'll see some more positives in that column as far as a 2-week change moving forward. But, I think we're doing, as I mentioned before, we're doing really well, even though we've experienced, the last 18 or so months of a pretty significant drought. And we have the spring ahead of us, and hopefully we'll have some additional rainfall as well.
Well, once this rain event is passed, if it becomes dry again, what are we looking at over the next couple of months?
Yeah, so one of the things that we put out on a monthly basis is our projected reservoir status. So we take and we generate two different, I guess, simulations really is what would happen if we have really high evaporation, lower rainfall, so low inflows, and higher water use. What would we see at the end of May? So these projections came out, I think, yesterday, and it represents what the system could look like at the end of May. So
and we're not, if it's dry.
If it's dry, and this is very dry, like as dry as it ever has been in the period of record. So this is a worst case scenario. This is not going to happen. It's going to be somewhere between worst case and the next slide that I'll show, which is normal. But if we do continue with dry conditions and minimum inflows and high evaporation, we see Lake Belton possibly entering stage 2 drought warning, which is a 10% reduction in water use at that reservoir for that area. Proctor, we're still seeing that it'll stay in stage 3. And potentially, we're not representing it here, but there's a possibility that Georgetown and Stillhouse may enter stage 2, after Belton. We're tracking demands and inflows into that system as well real closely to see, there may be some need to enter into stage 2 early than what the storage trigger represents. But that's something that we look at on a week-to-week basis. So that's what we're seeing for a minimum worst case scenario. If we had normal inflows and normal evaporation, we definitely see some improvement. Our total system storage up to, about 87%. Still our Little River system reservoirs, in stage 1 and Proctor still potentially in stage 3. But again, this is a what if scenario. It's not going to be the worst case, and it's probably not going to be normal. It could be above this, or it could be a little bit below this, in between normal and worst case.
So this shows us coming out of system stage 1, meaning that most of the reservoirs would not be under any type of.
A lot of the reservoirs wouldn't. Our stage 1 as a system percent trigger is about 79% full. So it's a little bit more than, I think it's 1.5 million acre feet of water stored in the 11 reservoirs. So, that's right now, that's what the scenarios are showing is, we would be, around, 7% or more above that stage 1 as a system trigger.
So from our current standpoint, we're looking at really it could go in either direction depending on how much rain we receive. And we could remain in drought or within stage 1 throughout the summer. Possibility of that.
Yeah, there's a possibility of that. I think we'll see improvement. We're not seeing any, a stage 2 entrance as system wide. We're not seeing that anytime soon. It depends on if we do, as you say, get more dry than we are right now. But, we have the 3 wettest months of the year that are typically ahead of us. So, we're going to see some additional rain chances. And hopefully we'll see some that are similar to what we saw today in the last couple of days, but maybe upstream of our reservoirs, and we can see some benefits.
All right. Well, thank you. I think that's pretty much all of our drought situation right there. So I see we didn't have any new questions come in while we were speaking, but I do have two that we received after the last brown bag that actually kind of pertain to your area. If you don't mind, we can go over those. So the first one was, I own property that backs up to the Brazos River. Can I put a pump to use water from the Brazos for my landscape and my garden?
Yeah.
So is that possible if you own land?
So what you just described, owning land adjacent to the river that goes down to the river, say, that what you described is a riparian right. So if you own land adjacent to the river, you have a riparian right to divert water for domestic and livestock. So as it relates to your lawn and garden, you can do that. And the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality and the Brazos Water Master, they're the ones that establish and monitor water rights diversions throughout the basin from Possum Kingdom downward. Those riparian rights are senior and superior to all appropriative rights. So that's one thing that a lot of folks don't know, but Molly Moeller, the Water Master, and TCQ, have a lot of information about that. It's always good if you are a domestic and livestock user. There's some constraints around that, and definitely reach out to TCQ to let them know that you own land and you want to use the water for domestic and livestock, because it's important for Molly to know and the Water Master to know to protect those riparian rights, and so that's an important thing to do if you want to use water for domestic and livestock.
And that's for any river or tributary in Texas, not just the Brazos, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's all established in the Texas Administrative Code related to domestic and livestock use, okay. But it does include all other river basins.
Okay, so if I was the landowner and I wanted to go ahead and put in a pump, do I need to contact the Water Master, or can I just put that pump in without getting permission?
Yeah, my understanding is you don't need to get permission from the Water Master. It's always a good idea to let the Water Master know so that they don't mistaking you for somebody else, and so they'll know that to protect the water that you want to divert for those domestic and livestock uses.
And that's for personal use only, right?
Yes.
Not for producing coastal to sell?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're diverting that water for commercial purposes, you have to have a permit, or you have to have a potentially contract with a river authority like the Brazos River Authority, to use that water for commercial purposes.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that. Okay, and the next question was, I have a farm in Central Texas. It's been very dry, and it looks like I might need to buy water this year. Will the Brazos River Authority be providing small, short-term water sales this year?
So that question, it kind of relates to what we call interruptible water. Interruptible water is 1 year water. We typically establish the amount that we'll authorize, that the BRA board authorizes in the fall. We went to the BRA board in November, and the recommendation was to not make interruptible water available for 2023 because of our drought situation. And we recognize that a lot of folks do rely on that interruptible water, for irrigation. At the November board meeting, we did let the board know that if we had an increase in storage, typically above that stage one as a system, so 80% or so, if we recover to that extent, we would come back to the board and recommend reevaluation of interruptible water and make it available, or at least have that authorization to make it available. So depending on what we see over the next couple months, if we see enough improvement, that's something that we will look to go to the board and make it available if conditions allow.
Okay, so we're at 75% now full,
Yeah.
and that would be 80%.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, and that would be going to the board in the fall again?
No, but that's a good question. We would go to the board potentially in May, or, we have board meetings every other month. So after May, it's July, and, I don't know if I'll just leave it at that as far as the board schedule goes. But, I think we would potentially go to one of those meetings if we, receive the rain and inflows and increased storages
Okay, so there is a chance
Yeah.
that that might occur for some of the farmers in the
before fall. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, those are our two questions. If anyone out there does have questions that they did not ask during the meeting, or if they'd like to send us an email, we'd be happy to answer whatever questions that you have, either by email, or we can answer them at the next Brown Bag on the Brazos, which will be coming up then in June, beginning of June. I think it's June 1st. So we'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. It's good to learn about what's going on with the rainfall. Hopefully it'll fill us up for summer and lots of recreation, and hopefully there will be no golden algae during that time. So anyway, thank you all for joining us. We're happy to do this every couple months, and we look forward to seeing you in June. Have a great afternoon.